Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Georgia Game Developer Association February meeting on how to publish your video game. Yay! Got a great panel of folks, and we're going to talk about it from a number of different areas. First, what you do before publishing, what you do after, and what you do during. And we'll start with everybody introducing themselves and talking about what they currently have up for people to buy, play, or pirate. Buy or play. Let's start over on the right.
I'm Joe of Puzzles by Joe. I have a franchise called Clutter that has 7 games in it that are available on a number of different distributors. They're for both PC and Mac, what they call casual download. So they're sold on sites like Big Fish Games, iWin, Game House, Wild Tangent, Shockwave, etc., etc.
I'm Dov Jacobson from Games That Work. We have a franchise as well for toothbrushing, for games to teach kids how to brush their teeth. It's on, iTunes and the Google Store and the Amazon Store now, and we have a VR version that's on Steam and the Viveport in China.
And you mentioned you're with Games at Work, right?
I did mention that.
Do not be afraid to mention your websites too. So I'm Andrew Greenberg with the GGDA, but on the game side, most of my games came out when you could still buy them in boxes at hot stores like Electronics Boutique, which a lot of. So while those sold millions of copies, a lot of those experiences are no longer valid, which is why I am moderating now, since I'm getting ready to launch Noble Armada and not being one of the actual speakers. So to my left.
I'm Zane Everett. I work at Motion Reality. However, I've only been working there for a short time, so I don't have any experience publishing there. So most of my experience in this session will be about the 5 years that I spent working at Coach in Education, releasing educational products for high school biology.
Hey guys, I'm Micah Brown. I currently own a studio, actually, EPO Corp, www.eplgames.com. We have a published game called Color Strike. You can find it on the apps, iOS and Android.
I'm Kevin Dressel. I'm the founder of Shiny Dolphin Games. We're a very small indie team, and we have a self-published game on Steam right now called Clash Force.
So a lot of different types of games, a lot of different experience here. So this is going to be a great overview of a lot of different opportunities you would have for publishing your own titles, especially for those of you here competing in the Best in Georgia competition right now. But I wanted to start off with a question for everybody, which is, what is the number one thing you wish you had known before you had published a game? And I will actually start with Kevin, because we were kind of talking about this before.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing was I wish we had known to reach out to press and really do our community involvement stuff before we published. I would say we didn't exactly rush it out there, but we did it without any preparation. And so I think our launch day was kind of, that's sort of the biggest thing, I think, for us.
So when you say press, you're not talking PC Gamer.
No, we're talking like indie game bloggers and YouTubers and streamers and all those people we reached out to maybe a day or two after releasing the game. But I think it would have been much more effective to reach out to them quite a bit earlier. This is advice I've gotten from other people in the community that have had more successful launches.
And I think that's a great point. I think another point is identify who your media is. Who are your influencers? Because it's not PC Gamer in the New York Times necessarily.
Right.
It's who are they specifically at Game Skinny and elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, mine is probably, can piggyback right off of that, but I think what I would have loved to have done if I could do it again is probably reach out for help first and figure out the steps that it takes to publish a game. I think that, like I said, goes right in line with what you're saying, because if you do reach out, there are a lot of people out there that have done it before that are willing to help. Something that I've recognized in my time in games is there's a ton of people that are willing to help you out with whatever you need, not just finding talent, but also helping you, identify who your audience is going to be, identifying the market, media, different ways of doing that, different ways they've done it. I think the game industry is constantly evolving, and I think we're all finding new and innovative ways to do that. So I think that's probably something I would have done.
So speaking of people who are always willing to help, Zane.
Yeah. I don't know if what I'm going to say is really the most important thing that I wish I had known, but it is going to be something different that I think a lot of developers should hear. Not everyone's going to like your game. Targeting teenagers for coach education, for them being in class and having to learn something, not everyone liked their game. Most of them tolerated it, in our case, but that is reality. Even people that I've known that have published games for entertainment. As developers, we invest a lot of our blood, sweat, time, soul into the things that we are creating, and it is just reality that someone's going to stomp on that.
I wish I'd listened to my wife. Because we made a game, and it's really for mothers to buy for their children, to teach their kids how to brush their teeth so they don't have to do it. And that's a good sales proposition right there. But I was into the, being a up-to-date game publisher now, and wanted to do a freemium game. Freemium was a mistake, because they get enough to brush their teeth for the free version, and the kids are playing the game. I can't talk to the parents anymore about how they should pay for it. If I had made the mom, which is what my wife said, just make them pay $1 to get the game, or $3, make them buy the game. And we should have picked the right model for our product instead of going with freemium.
Well, I'm 60, and I had 3 things on my mind, and I can only remember one of them right now. So the main thing, I'm sure I'll get to a couple by the end of this, but the main thing is strike while the iron is hot, is the old expression. And my main regret is not doing things sooner. Oh, I do have the second one. Which related to that is you should realize right off the bat that it's a marathon, not a sprint. Okay? Now that seems to contradict strike while the iron's hot because you want to get out something there quick. But basically what you want to do is you want to get it out there so you learn from it so you can do the next one better. And if you keep going, eventually, my belief is good things will happen. So that's it. From the, the main thing is I wish I started earlier. I wish I left my last job prior to that earlier. And I wish I did not hedge my bets and work for a company locally here, which cost me about $1 million a year or so too. Because in hindsight, I hit the market as the curve was going down, and I would have had twice as much money from at least a couple of the games than I ended up having. I mean, that's. With hindsight, I can see that, but, so get it out there, get it out quick, and then get out the next one, et cetera, et cetera.
The lesson from Joe, start when you're in high school, so
Sure.
You're all too late. All right, but following on what you said about it being a marathon, I'll go in the reverse order. 3 months out from when you publish, what should you be doing then to prepare for publishing? What are some of the
3 months
tasks?
before you publish?
3 months before you publish.
Okay.
This is a marathon, and it doesn't end when you publish. It ends long after you publish. 3 months ahead, what should you be doing?
So I'm going to flip that for 2 things. So first of all, I cheated. I picked a market where I didn't technically have to publish. I picked a market I already knew, and unlike Steam or Kickstarter or anything else, I didn't have to do my own marketing. I knew that if I created a game that met certain criteria, I would get 100,000. I would get allowed on a couple sites, and I would get 100,000 eyeballs. Okay? So 3 months, well, I'm just finishing the game and making it really, really good. Okay? But flipping it, when I release a game, it's still a month or so before Big Fish will do it. So actually, I sell it through my own site. I still now use my beta testers more than I did for my first couple of games. And I have no problem releasing it now because it is digital, knowing it might have some bugs and I might find it. And the flip side, which I was getting to, is the 3 months after you release, what you should be doing is not hedging your bets, working for somebody else, and or going, is this going to make enough money or whatever? You should be working on the next game. At least once you realize you are going to make something. So once, you can hedge your bets. I did, whatever. But once you realize you are going to make enough, it took me a while to get out of that mode of procrastination where I went, is this going to make enough? I knew, but I didn't trust it. And I really should have been just working on the next game because, again, I'm a commodity. I'm a can of coffee beans. And the quicker I can get out that next thing, the more money I'll make. If I shine up the can too much, it doesn't matter. So my biggest is my own procrastination and my own waiting to watch the reviews and the positives and negatives, and and it's a month and a half before I even see whether I get any money or not, and
And the first game is rarely a success, so you should be preparing for the second game, which will be a success anyway.
At least in my business, it was. The franchise saved me, but that's another question down the road.
All right, Dove. 3 months ahead, what you should be doing?
Yeah, I think you should be working at that other job and hedging your bets.
And listening to your wife.
Because it's a hit-driven business, and there's a salience, a visibility to the people who do well, and for every Joe, there's 100, easily 100 people who quit their jobs, and.
But I'm not a hit. I'm a medium, repeatable thing.
You're enough of a hit that
okay.
you're able to make a living.
He's Joe. He's not
But it wasn't. I don't consider it a hit. I consider it just
the singles rather than the home runs.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think we're in a business, especially like if you look at the App Store. There's a billion people who can get a game downloaded, something like a billion.
Yeah.
There are a million games. So, and it's not like they're evenly distributed, like there's 1,000 users for every game. No, there's 100 million users for one game and 5 users for 100,000 games. And do the numbers and don't quit your job.
All right, Zane, 3 months out. 3 months ahead.
So, at least with Cogent's experience in the education space, 3 months out, you were making your game. Because the irony there is that if you're doing a normal entertainment game, 3 months out, you should be marketing, trying to get the word out about your stuff. The way Cogent worked in the education space was that we did all of that marketing beforehand because we had to write a paper to the U.S. government to be able to get funding. So we did all of that due diligence before we ever started the project. We knew who we were going to release the product to. Specifically, if it was 2 teachers, the 2 teachers that we're going to work with for this, and then we will sell it to other teachers later. That was a year before the project even started. So 3 months out, you were working on your game and making sure that it worked on the devices you were going to test in the classroom on.
Yeah, I think maybe I would take it even a step further. I think, for me at least, when I first started to develop, when the idea first came about that we wanted to develop a game, I immediately started telling people, right? I think it's important to market from day one. I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever gotten was don't be afraid to share your idea early. I think there's a huge fear that if you share it too early, then people might take your idea. Right? I think, especially in the industry that we work in, there's a ton of people with a ton of ideas going out, right? So your idea being unique is probably going to be rare, but I think as what good game designers do is they are able to take an idea and really make it work in an interesting and fun way that will encourage people to play it, right? And from that, you gain, fandom. People start to really appreciate the work that you're doing because of that very fact, right? I think it kind of sort of ties in. There's a couple musicians in the room, and I think that's what music is as well, too, right? That a chord progression is probably a chord progression used 1,000 times, right? But it's how you use it. I think that makes a difference. And I think up to that 3-month point, I think setting reasonable expectations for yourself in terms of once you launch, once you release your title, once you publish it, once it's out there, not setting too much of an expectation that will essentially demoralize you. I think that's a danger as well. When it gets out there, if it's not a hit, if it doesn't get 1 million views or 1 million sales within the first 6 months, some people take that as a failure, but I think obviously you can learn a lot from your failures. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you had a bad idea, right? That can be a lot of things involved in that. It can be how well you marketed, how well you got the word out there, and those things, So a lot of things to think about, but that's what I would say.
Okay, well, I'll twist that and I'll riff off of what you said about there's, millions of users for one game and fewer for the rest. So I feel like something that we were not doing effectively 3 months before launch was really understanding what made our game interesting. When we put up our coming soon page on Steam, we just said it's a retro platformer, basically. So, we said it was a retro platformer inspired by 8-bit, stuff, but it had a lot more to it in terms of the inspirations that we didn't really include in that and didn't really realize until after launch, in fact, what was making it interesting to people. The cool thing was inspired by Saturday morning cartoons, which is where everything in the art style really came from. But we didn't include that. So I think there was a lack of introspection or something around the, hey, we have to launch in 3 months area. We focused on bug fixing and getting the game ready to ship, and we didn't really focus on how to market it as what is the pitch to people? What is the pitch to audiences? What is the pitch to streamers? Why would they even want to play this? So that's sort of, I feel like you should have that earlier, probably years before launching. But going off of my experience anyway, you should take a close look at that before you launch and basically do a pass over all that stuff and make sure that what you're about to put on the App Store or on Steam is an interesting proposition. So,
well, let's keep building on that. Let's keep building on the marketing side, figuring out what your value proposition is, why folks are going to enjoy your game, and how you promote that. So you've talked about influencers. You're talking about having something to pitch to the influencers. How should you do that? Who should you be reaching out to? How do you find them? And what should you be telling them to get them interested? They got a bunch of folks bombarding them.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Well, to find them, we basically looked at people who were covering similar games. There's a lot of people who are covering bigger indie games, or specific genres or whatever. So we looked at people who were covering, retro Mega Man type games and stuff. And the thing that I think we didn't realize is that you sort of need to write what they're going to say for them. If you're emailing press, you kind of have to give them the entire story in a concise way that's not a ridiculous read. And it's really the same with streamers. You have to tell them, why is it interesting to your audience? Why will you have fun playing this for 3 hours while people watch? So I don't know. I think this is stuff I'm just sort of learning as I go. This is my current analysis.
I think that's a great breakdown. The reason you give a press release to the press is so they have all the information.
Right, because they don't care if you just say, hey, I've got a retro 8-bit shooter, because they get 400 of those a day, because that's a very common indie genre. Right. Yeah.
Do you want to build on that? Did you put together a press kit?
I did, actually. I think I had a bit of maybe a slight advantage because I went to Full Sail. The program that I went to helped to prepare us for that. It was a particular class. It was a marketing class We had to put together a bit of a package and write a press release and those kinds of things, which worked out to my benefit because as we were trying to put the game out there, it came up like, hey, well, what do? We should probably, look for somebody who's willing to actually take and, give our game some press. So we took the time, had good format, from all the classes I took. So I would actually say that one of the benefits of having to do it yourself is fumbling through it sometimes. I think, that teaches you a lot. I think not only are you gaining skills in terms of, okay, what's the next steps to getting my game out there, but I think it's also important to know, okay, the details of how to actually do that, right? Writing a press release for yourself, right, is something that I think can be immensely important. Not only can you have that for yourself, but you can also share it. You can also, help take your products in the future to the next level as well, and writing those words, like you were saying, I think can be beneficial. But on the other side of that, when you have somebody who is going to play your game, for instance, for the first time, if you find a streamer on Twitch or somebody who plays video games on YouTube, right, I think allowing them to experience the game in their own way. I think a lot of gamers out there nowadays are starting to, invent narratives around indie games, particularly when they don't necessarily particularly have a story in some cases. And I think that's really important because that's where a lot of people, in an imagination sort of sense, gain their fun and fandom of games, is kind of imagining themselves in a particular way in a scenario. Right? So.
How'd you guys convince teachers that they needed the game after you had finished it for those 2 teachers who you were designing it for?
So those 2 teachers gave us stats about how students liked the game, but in particular how well they learned information from the game. And that was really what sold teachers and other educational bodies that they should be purchasing the games. But moving forward, I'm going into the entertainment space, and one thing that I am learning very quickly promoting my own game, Raj Mandala, is that making posts on social media frequently to build following is a big key, and you need to start doing that early. It kind of goes back to what you just said about share your idea early, and you can't be afraid that someone's going to steal it. And in this industry, really, no one's going to steal it because they're already working on their own ideas. That's just the reality of it.
Your grandmother has ideas for games,
right?
She's told you about them, so ideas are a dime a dozen.
Regular posts on social media go a long way to gradually snowballing interest in your idea. A perfect case of this that I got to see personally was for a niche genetic survival game. It originally debuted in Siege 4 years ago, and they executed a flawless social media campaign where they gradually got followers, launched Kickstarter, and were incredibly successful. And I think that is a template that should be followed by the industry here.
So where is the social media? Just your own wall, your own Twitter? Where are they doing it?
So create your own Facebook page, make groups, have that page join other groups, and post on all of those regularly. If you want to do one social media, that's great. Get into a bunch of different like Facebook groups and post all over those regularly. Do cross-posting between different social medias, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the things. And something that I will be looking into this week for myself is an application that allows you to post to all the things all at once.
So Hootsuite or somebody else. All right, Dove, Mr. Marketing.
One thing I would, talking about press release, we did a couple of press releases, and what I would recommend against is sending out a press release on a press wire. I thought, well, I have this press release, how do we get it into people's hands? And people do it online. I mean, the companies will do this, these press wires, and some of them are like $700 or $500, and I think I got it down to like $350. So I thought, okay, that's less than 700. So I'll send it out there, and they send back reports a bunch of newspapers you never heard of, that no one's ever read, that don't probably exist. Meanwhile, you look at, in our case, mommy bloggers, but really any blogger, you say, put our game in there, and they say, well, yeah, but well, how about $50? And because it's not going to buy you a good review, I'm still going to be ethical, but I want $50 to even look at the game. And I'm like, well, here's 25. And they say, okay, and then they put it in there. And that's a lot more, so 25 into 350 is some number. And that amount of views on bloggers. 14. I could have gotten 14 websites, bloggers with real followers that trust that instead of these, the Akron Daily Toenail, whatever the newspapers that didn't exist.
And I think targeting like that's important because I've read about folks talking about how they get pickup in Time Magazine and get no increase in sales, get some mention on Rock, Paper, Shotgun or something, and suddenly, boom, they explode. So definitely targeting is a key one. Joe?
Well, my situation's a little different. Again, I don't really do marketing, but I do have to deal with the gatekeepers. I go through several distributors, and for the first game, only a few of them took the first game. And so my lesson that I want to say is, never hear the word no. Through perseverance, eating crow after being snotty to one of them, I was able to, basically, I don't think there's any site now that I ever approached that I didn't finally get on. One site, in fact, I got a letter from a VP that said, basically, so I tried to do an end run around the public relations people or whatever, the developer relations people kept turning me down. And I kept telling them about the big fish numbers or whatever. This was on a site called Wild Tangent. And they kept saying no, no, no. But every game I'd go back to them and hit them with, hey, my game's doing this now. This, are you sure you don't want it? It could make you money. And I finally got sick of getting a no from them that I went through LinkedIn, looked through the person I was talking to, their boss, and connected with them through LinkedIn and started connecting, trying to do an end run around them. I finally got an email back that said, basically, Joe, although we admire your tenacity, you're this close to us, never wanting to hear from you again. But it turns out my tenacity actually worked, that they were so sick of hearing from me, they had a conversation with this guy who was their boss, and they kept complaining to him about me. And he said, well, why does this guy keep bothering you? He says, well, because he's got good numbers over at Big Fish and so forth. He keeps sending us that. And he says, well, how's he doing over there? And the guy says, well, his numbers are good. And the VP said, well, why aren't you taking his game then? And they took the first game, and from then on, boom. Over the curve, the gatekeepers, the people that think they're protecting their customers from bad product, have lightened up quite a bit because they realize more product is actually better for their site within boundaries. So the snooty people that used to reject my games, the more I went back to them and showed them other games that did well, they would, finally reverse their decision on me. So definitely never, I always tried to be respectful. There was only one time I got snotty with one, and then I met that person in person and actually apologized so that they would consider my third and fourth game. And for me, because it's all about these trickles, I have like 12 different distributors. Big Fish is the big one, but then I can't really afford to piss off any, one company. You don't want that anyway. So for me, it's all about just keep trying, and it's a little less direct, or it's a little more directed than you guys, but it's not hard to do. These. I know it's not your target audience, but if it was, you could still create a game for the casual, even though it's kind of shrunk. And all you have to do is go up to the developer relations person and say, email them and start a conversation.
But there's not a game in the Best in Georgia competition that wouldn't fit on Big Fish. They would all fit somewhere there. There's a category for each.
No,
of those.
that's not true. No.
Action games?
No, incorrect.
All right.
Incorrect. They wouldn't even take, I think, one of Robert's games that Game House took or whatever.
Okay.
But for instance, a minimalist game, like Sinker, like Robert's Sinker, Big Fish has no.
Well, then let's talk about a publisher. You two both have publisher experience. I don't think
I've talked to people.
you talk. All right. Well, let's continue on around then. When I was doing games, the publisher provided the QA, the marketing, the PR. They pressed the CDs. Remember what those are? You used to be able to buy a big Best Buy. Put them in the boxes, shipped them to the stores, sold them, and we got our royalties in the end usually. Now, what do you expect a publisher to do?
Take their 60% or more, and that's about it. No, actually, so I'm sorry. Big Fish has been nice to me. I mean, my first game, they only put out 1 or 2 games a day. So you know you're going to get the front page, even if it's just a little square. So that's good. When I put out my first game, I knew I was going to get 100,000 eyeballs. If I could get a decent conversion rate, I'd do okay. But I was the secondary game of the day, which is actually pretty shit. And in fact, in the reviews, they thought about that, whether my game deserved to be the secondary game. But the nice thing about Big Fish is it's a true chart, and I climbed up the chart. And the second game, still not the game of the day. The third game, I finally talked them into. They gave me the game of the day spot, and I jumped up higher and so forth. And now I have enough of a fan base on Big Fish that when my game launches, it launches in the number 10 spot, you know. And that's big. That's somebody at Big Fish at least acknowledging that I've made them some money or whatever, right? There's still the problem of that person you have to, whether it's a death by committee kind of thing or whatever. But, you know, they've been good to me, but I'm never going to get higher than 10 because of the way their system works. I'm never going to be able to sell my game there for $15 as opposed to the 7. Not going to happen, you know, and I can ask for a little extra things, like they put me in their newsletter occasionally, and asking is good. Definitely, one of the things I did in January was I waited till the Christmas was over and I wrote all my distributors and said, is there anything I can do to just get a little extra kind of marketing love? You know, is there anything I can do? I'm in here for the long, I remind them I'm in here for the long haul. My next game's coming out in a few months. You know, haven't heard, that has yet to yield a positive response.
Tenacity. The squeaky Joe gets through.
Correct, but you know that's what I do. It's not the same as the bloggers and the rest, and I maintain my own Facebook thing, but I've never seen the impact of social media yet for me and my customers. Even though I have a group that I keep in contact with, and you know I probably have 50 to 100 customers that watch my clutter page on Facebook, you know, and interact and get excited when I put out a new game. Does it lead to secondary sales? Yes. I definitely have a little bit of that going on, but it's minor. It's not the game I need to worry about.
So in your case, your publisher provides you a platform to sell, space on that platform, and promotional support.
And they have the customers. A keyword you should take away is aggregate. And it's one of the problems with the freaking App Store and the way things are, okay? Back in 2005, when the boom happened to the casual market, when they figured out women over 40 actually wanted to play games if they were like Candy Crush or a hidden object game or Mahjong, as opposed to a shooter, that market went like this. And Big Fish owns all the hidden object people, and then there's a bunch of other people that own the 3-ball match and all the rest. And they're aggregators, okay? That's missing in the App Store. If you were a first-person shooter and could go to, you know, a website that just had first-person shooters, people coming to it, and Steam's close, but Steam screwed things up so badly that they're not, okay? But if you had aggregators, they'd be more in my situation where you just have to get by the person who decides to put it on your site, and then you know you'd get the eyeballs. Instead, there's this algorithm. You basically are forced to do your own marketing. In my case, they have the customers, and then they allow me access to their customers, which is why they take 60% and even more, actually. But I'm happy with that. And I sell my games at $7, not freaking $1, not free to premium. You know, I don't have to pray, you know, that somebody's going to pay for it someday. You know, and I get to keep, you know, out of the $7, I get to keep 3. So.
All right, Dov, you've worked with publishers. What should folks be looking for? What do you look for?
Well, when you went over with I just want to reminisce, if I can, about what you said.
Back when Turner Interactive was the publisher.
Well, I don't even want to get into that. I like being on the other side. Because, okay, so you talked about they would, press this. And so, they would buy shelf space to put it on, buy ads and TV ads even sometimes. And they would give you royalties, maybe. But usually they didn't give you royalties because they gave you something much better than royalties.
An advance.
An advance. An advance that you could work down maybe. Yes.
Just tell kids about that they don't believe it.
They would pay you before the game was done, all the costs, including the profit, even though you couldn't call it profit.
But you budget 10% profit into your numbers anyway.
Mm-hmm. And then some little extra too, just in case things went wrong. And the beauty part of that is, first of all, you could pay people nicely. That would be good. Mm-hmm. And the other part that was good about it is they had skin in the game. You didn't have to beg them to market it. They had money to earn back. But so my goal in life is to figure out how to get someone else to put skin in the game. Somebody who has a marketing capability. Yeah. And I think that model is out there. I think this model sucks. But because I mean, I did this by accident. We made a game that was really good. We were in the business you were in, getting government grants that would pay us to make games. And we made one game that was heads and shoulders better than other games in the way it worked, in the way it actually changed people's behavior. So we thought, well, we'll just sell it. But then we found we're a really good game development company and a shitty marketing company. It's a totally different business. Yep. And it requires just as much, maybe more skill and more talent and more experience. And suddenly we depend on ourselves to get all that out of nowhere, compete against everyone else. I'd rather deal with somebody who knew how to do it. Yep.
All right, so Kevin, you're talking to publishers. What are you looking for in a publisher?
Well, I mean,
other than $1 million advance.
Well, exactly. That would be fantastic.
It was.
I mean, let's talk realistic here. I mean, indie developers, we have kind of this thing about we want to be independent, right? You don't want to be beholden to someone else. You want to keep creative control and all this stuff. Like, I'm battling with this myself. I don't even know. But, I mean, the thing is, I don't know. One thing I'll say is not every publisher wants creative control. I don't know. I haven't worked with any of them, so I don't know, like, what the stakes are. I don't know what they benefit, how we benefit, all of this. But I will say that there's sort of a spectrum of what publishers are offering. Like, some of them are offering, like, purely marketing. Like, I've talked mostly to mobile game publishers, and they talk about helping you get featured on the App Store and taking a cut for that with no creative input. And my question then is, like, what's their motivation to actually do a good job? I don't know. I haven't talked to them enough to know this or worked with them. So
can I jump in for a second? So the problem is that the middlemen are the only people making money right now consistently in the game. Because what they care about is they're a publisher. They'll go to 200 indies, and all they care about is two. Shotgun approach. Ooh, two got lucky, and they made some money. And they made some money off the big fit. But the 98. Hey, and even if you got the little app for a day and a half, doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter to them because it's a numbers game to them. All they care about is the 2 out of the 100. That's why they don't care about creative control because it doesn't matter.
People warned me about that.
Yep, it's
so
the middleman. So
I've heard similar things.
One avenue to success in the games business is figure out how to be a middleman. If you want reliable success.
But I will say though, like as an unknown indie developer, I don't know how to get featured on the App Store other than just having a great game. But I mean, it's sort of a gamble, I suppose. I don't know.
Right.
There's sort of trade-offs here that I don't really understand fully. But I mean, the dream would be to, get picked up by some big company. Like, I don't know, EA wants to publish my game, woohoo! But I don't know, like, at that point, then you lose some creative control. And as indies, I think we're all very, think of ourselves as artists.
Being featured is no guarantee of sales.
Right, that too, yeah.
It isn't.
All right, well, talking about being featured, let's talk day of. You're actually putting it up for sale that day, and everyone's been on different platforms. What are you doing that day? And actually, next week we're going to be streaming Robert Waller as he pulls his hair out, because he is launching on multiple platforms, and we'll be live streaming him at the same time. So live stream Robert Waller going crazy.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
But Dave, on launch day,
doing?
what should you be doing?
We were hitting Control R repeatedly on our Steam thing and realizing that it doesn't update for 24 hours.
That was in the movie.
24 hours refresh.
I don't know. We were trying to understand. I was watching Google Analytics, trying to understand what was happening. And we were sort of understanding things like maybe we made the price too high, maybe we need more content. Why aren't people staying on the page longer? I don't know. And I don't know. We should have been reaching out to press during that time, probably, or like interacting with the community, which we were kind of doing, but mostly we were just watching numbers that weren't moving and being like, hey, we launched the game, and not really doing anything constructive. So
I think that's great input. I like it. Dave, launch day.
Yeah. I think.
What were you doing versus what should you have been doing?
Probably not enough, if I didn't say what I was doing. But what you should be doing, I think, first off, is taking a moment to recognize what an accomplishment it is to publish a game, right? Nowadays, it seems pretty easy to do, and it probably is too easy to do, honestly. But I think that is an accomplishment, and I think anybody who's successful in their craft, once they accomplish something, they do take a moment to recognize what they've accomplished. In addition to trying to get people to actually play the game at that point, right? Like, obviously don't stop marketing, obviously don't stop pushing your game, continue on social media, continue in the avenues that you're trying to push the game to get it out, but get people to play it. Reason is because if you get people to play it, you'll get some type of review in the game, if it's just a self-review, or maybe if you're from a platform that allows to actually write reviews on the game, that's a plus. In addition, you will also be able to see how much fun and how much people are appreciating your game, right? We live in a day where you can update the game, you can make it better, right? So I don't think that your development should stop there day one. I don't think you should, we launched the game, we put it out there, it's going to make this much money, we're done with that one. Let's necessarily move on to the next one. There may be ways of improving what you already launched. So I think you should be trying to get to that point to where you can improve upon the game, add things, take things out if they're bad. If you need to fix things, as most developers usually do, bugs, things happen. In my case, we launched on a mobile platform, so you're always needing to update because the hardware is always changing. So you don't want to leave it, right? Because if people are enjoying it, people are playing it, the more people are enjoying it, the more people are playing it, the more bugs you probably need to fix because it's out there, right? So there's all kinds of things to be considering at that time. So I think that's probably.
The education space is very different. Release day is extremely hectic. Imagine going into probably 12 classrooms with 2 teachers that are very nervous that 4 people are coming in, disrupting their classrooms. You've got teenagers that don't care. And having to get them to play the game, you have technical difficulties that you are trying to decide whether or not to make sacrifices about whether or not you're gathering data from students. Do you pair people up if one device crashes? It's hectic. It is a full day, and it takes a week to recover afterwards. It's a great feeling and experience when you get just a handful of teenagers say, I really like this, I learned something. When you hear teachers say, I think that they were engaged, I've never seen them look this attentive at a book. Those are very exciting things to hear out of all of that stress. Great experience, but I also think it's probably caused me to lose a little bit of my hair.
Launch day?
Okay, well, leaving aside the last year or so, I think this is the greatest country in the world. But it's not the only country in the world. And it's not got all the players in the world. And it certainly doesn't have all the reviewers in it. And some of our most enthusiastic and effective reviewers and Let's Players are overseas. And they do these great reviews that I can't understand a word of because it's in Korean or German or something, but it's great. That's what I would be doing, is making sure I'm not just in my own bubble, which it's a big bubble, is a much bigger one.
Can I actually add to that, actually?
Yeah.
I think we should also encourage people to try to get meaningful reviews, and not just, I played the game, it's great, I had fun, but, if obviously there's going to be that on certain platforms with people you don't know, but for the people who you do know, I think it's important to actually pick their brain a little bit on what you just made, right? It's a game that's supposed to be experienced in a particular way, but sometimes people experience things in the way that you weren't intending for them to experience it. So I think that can be extremely valuable.
Best way to go about that is to actually engage on that person's page, follow them, and engage with them, and have even if it's an online relationship, those are valid relationships, but a true relationship will get people to actually invest in your game.
Well, before we go on to Joe, how many of you feel it is proper for a game designer to comment on the review publicly?
Their own game?
Sure.
On their own game, yeah. No, I definitely think so. And I know there are a lot of developers who don't want to do that, who feel like I shouldn't be
My
commenting on
customers
it.
love
Does that include apologizing?
Nah, yeah. Don't be hostile
Sorry
to
for you,
any
Valor.
reviewer.
Sorry for you.
Right.
Joke's on you.
All right, Joe.
So,
Day of launch.
yeah, well, I launch in several places, but basically where I can, and Big Fish is still the biggest and probably the most hardcore of my audience, because Big Fish does own the hidden object people, and that's where they mostly are. I have a rule of thumb. I watch the reviews. I read all the reviews. I no longer care about the, quote, negative reviews that say things like, looks like a student project, a reviewer that's pissed at Big Fish for even allowing my game on the site. But my game's so bad, nobody should play it. Okay?
I opened up with that. Haters are gonna hate.
Correct. So my rule of thumb is this for success. I listen very carefully to the people that love my game, and I don't care why they love it, even though I listen to it. What I care about is what they're still complaining about. Okay? But only from the lovers. I don't give a shit at what the haters say. So I want to listen to the people that love my game and then still listen very closely to whatever they're complaining about still, and I want to remove that.
So if you love Joe, whisper evil nothings in his ear.
And they, you don't want to write a mediocre game. That's all I'm telling you. You don't want a game where people play it and go, it's okay. You actually want the haters, as far as I'm concerned. Because if you don't have the haters, you have a lukewarm game. You want people that passionately get it and passionately don't understand why the hell you did it. So.
All right, last question, then we're going to open up to Q&A. And we'll start off with you, Joe, again. What is post-launch day? What is the most important thing you should do for that game, not your next game? Well, for you, I'll let you talk about the franchise. We'll have everyone else answer that question. What's the most important thing you should do after launch? Oh, just tell them, launch more games.
Well, there's that, but the important thing to do after you launch, enjoy it, okay? Don't, even though I always focus on the next and what I'm doing or whatever, you need to enjoy your successes no matter how big or how small. Seriously, and everything's just a freaking learning curve. It's just, and if you're married, here's advice: don't say anything to your wife predictive. Okay?
It'll come back to haunt you.
Because if you think you're gonna make this much in a year, don't say it. Really, keep it to yourself. You'll be much happier in the long run, no matter what. So, go enjoy it. Really.
I'd say the opposite. I'd say update the game. Update the game, because what's going to happen is your reviews might not be quite as good as you want to, but you're getting this download count. And I'm sorry, reviews are doing pretty well. but there are things that you know are going to bite you because you're seeing it in what people are writing. You're going to be invested in that build, because when you do an update, you have to start from scratch again on your reviews. At least on the Apple Store, it's not so true in the Android store.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't look like. For me, that's going into the next game, and the next game is in fact what you call an update. I have a never-ending clutter in a sense.
But this is the same title, the same URL, same SKU.
I realize that, and it works on Steam, and it brings you to the top again, and there's a mess there. But my downloads happen in the first 2 or 3 days, and it's gone. I'm never going to see those again.
Yeah, but ours bill. I mean, yeah, there's a peak, because it's new, but at least our product, it's a slow build. But we get invested in the reputation of a particular build that we know we're going to lose, and we're afraid to update it. But we should be doing it all the time. We don't want to let the little problems that we see right away. You got to get rid of them fast.
Why didn't you catch those ahead of time?
Because I don't have a million. Because we have 3 or 4 testers, and then the day of the release we have
a million.
Yeah, right. And they have machine, devices that we never heard of, or more importantly, they hold their camera, their cell phone upside down.
Yeah, it is easy.
So just fucking turn it this way. This way.
The device problem is probably your biggest problem.
It's the user problem too. Everybody uses it a little differently.
All right, Zane.
I don't have that problem with the PC devices, but I understand what you're saying.
So, in education space, that point it's qualitative and quantitative data analysis. You've just got a ton of data from 12 classes.
Figure out what it means.
Now you have to write a report for the federal government since you were federally funded. They want to know what their money was doing and why.
Excellent. And I think everybody should do that. Do your metrics.
Can't. Not allowed. MySpace.
2 things. I think if you have a website and you have the opportunity to talk to the people who are playing your game, you should interact with them, get some feedback. This not only will help you probably with the game that you launched, but future games, right? It will also let your player base know that you care as a developer, right? You're listening to them. I think that can go a long way, especially when you talk to a few people, maybe a couple of key people who are, big names, bigger names that you might not recognize. They can certainly help to market your game, your future product, your brand, company, your studio, whatever. And that's really important. And I think, secondly, play your own game. Right? I don't think people do that enough, especially if you're a developer. Obviously, some games, if you made a puzzle game, you probably know how to beat every level. But you should still play it, in my opinion. Number one, you can probably find a lot of those issues. Probably add a lot of value to your own game by doing that. And you should enjoy your own product. I think it goes in line with what you were saying about enjoy it, right? I think that's definitely part of it.
Okay, well, we watched every stream that we could find. We watched every YouTube video, and we read every review, and we looked at our numbers, and we learned what people didn't like, and then we fixed it afterwards as soon as we could. That was basically our strategy for for correcting our launch mistakes. So
relax, have fun, study your metrics, and fix. All right, questions from the audience. Anyone have questions? Ron.
You guys all mentioned that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And follow up to the last question that you had there is like, how do you help out with the long tail of the game? Like, what are you doing to try to get sales after that really has worn off, so to speak?
Who wants to jump on that one?
For me, it's just the franchise.
Oh, repeating the question. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. What do you do to get the long tail going? Where else do you go to get sales? Does that sum it up?
Yeah.
So 2 things for me. It's definitely make this. For me, it was make the sequel, and the et cetera, et cetera. And then it was constantly asking myself, where else could I be? So, for instance, an example very recently, just from watching Robert's game on Congregate. One of the reasons I went to Unity is so that I can be on mobile, I can be wherever I want. And Congregate, I don't know how small or big it'll be, but it'll definitely be included in my next trickle after I go to my regular distributors, because they seem to have a nice fair system where they're only releasing 1 or 2 games a day, and I see no reason why Clutter can't go get some new customers over there, even though they don't have a lot of hidden object games and stuff there, but it should be able to be a little bit of a trickle. And I doubt if Congregate will say no to me with my numbers, but maybe, So.
Anybody else? Where else would you take it?
Yeah, I think I'll add on to that. I think with idea that it's a marathon and not a sprint, I think one of the things that indie developers can take advantage of is that you're not particularly or necessarily, unless you've done this to yourself, giving yourself a deadline. Obviously, that goes with it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? If you can take as much time as you need to make sure the game is the one that you want to release, quality-wise. So go into launching a game with that idea, and after that, I think not being afraid to rebrand your game if it needs some rebranding. I think there's sometimes can be some fear in that. If the game didn't do well, if it's not successful, don't be afraid to, try it again, right? Maybe the same idea, maybe the same mechanics, change up the art a little bit or something like that, but just take a look at it from every angle and, try it again and take time and add the value where the value needs to be added.
I think another thing is you've invested a lot in the content and the gameplay, the code. Think about where else you might be able to move it. What other platforms? For example, we were idiots to be slow to get on Amazon. It required recoding it a little bit to put in the hooks that they wanted, but it would have been good to get on there when there were fewer games. It would have been good to get on there at the beginning when they were paying you per minute that people played your game, and people got the game for free, and you got paid some amount, a couple pennies per minute. What a great deal that was, but it took us so long to catch on that the door closed in front of us.
All right, any other questions? Yes.
Yeah. Any tips on when to release the game? Should you wait for a specific date or just hit up the door?
Any tips on when to release the game, other than when it's right?
Don't put anything on Kickstarter in December.
Yeah, or ship in this. Don't ship in December.
This is in the old days. I actually used to love January for launching games. Everyone would have their Christmas money. You're not up against a ton of free Christmas products, and we always had good sales in January on new releases. I don't know how applicable that is anymore. We certainly love it. The thing that I'm seeing now is launch when you know you have a lot of time before and after to support your game.
Yep.
When your team has time available to sit down and do it. If you know that you're about to, don't launch when you're about to have your second baby. Sorry, Rod, and he left. Launch when you know you'll have some time.
Also, say on Steam, you should look at the Steam sales. We roughly know when they're going to be because they're seasonal. So they have some rules about how much time you can have in between your launch date and sales and stuff. So,
what are those rules? I don't know those.
Let's see. I don't remember the exact dates, but after you launch, if you have a launch discount, there's some amount of time you have to wait before you can do any sales. After you launch, even if you don't do a launch discount, there's a shorter amount of time you have to wait before you can participate in sales.
You have to know.
And if you have an option of a sale or not, like my distributors often ask me if I want to be involved in the sale, the answer is always yes.
Yes.
It's never no. However, with that said, I never discount. I never sell my game on my own site for a sale. I don't get into that game. But I'll be part of somebody else's sale all the time.
Or bundle.
Yeah, I haven't been in a bundle. They actually bundle my own games. I'm in a 5-bundle set on I Win, which is really nice. And so, yeah. Other bundles, I'm against what's the big one?
Humble
Bundle. I'm really against the Humble bundle. unless you're borderline and really need the extra exposure. If you already have pretty good exposure yourself, your humble bundle is going to dilute you. But if you're really on the cusp of the other and you really need to be pushed over bigger exposure, sure, do the humble bundle. That's just my 2 cents.
All right, question over there. Oh, I saw a hand up for a question. Another question? Yes.
Kind of follow up to what you were saying on my question. What are the nuances of going to different marketplaces, like for people who have released the game and then went to a different platform marketplace? What did it take to get that?
What are the nuances of going to a different platform? What's involved? What should you look out for after releasing on one platform?
Well, you have the benefit. First of all the mistakes you made launching it. You're right. A big part of it is, branding and in the large sense of the word, figuring out what it is that your game appeals to. You said not enough introspection. It's too much introspection. You seeing it all from the inside before you launch it, and God bless you if you can step outside yourself a little bit to see the way other people are going to see it before you do it. Sometimes you can, but usually you're waiting for other people to help you see it from outside, so you can take that knowledge with you. Of course, on the other new platform, it's different audience usually, but you have that advantage. To do that, plus you look at the way things look to the users on Vive, which was all Chinese, so that was difficult. But they did have a different point of view, and there was someone there to help us, port our brand, which we understood a little better, into their world, which they understood.
I think part of actually stepping outside yourself a little bit is not being afraid to launch on a particular platform because you don't like that platform. Right? I know some people who actually develop games, and they say, I'm going to this platform, but not this platform. Like, well, why wouldn't you go to this platform? Right? I'm going to PlayStation, not Xbox. Like, why? That's ridiculous.
Sales for sales.
Right, exactly. So certainly step outside yourself from that perspective too, right? Because you're making games and you're publishing, and you're hoping to push it out to a very big, broad audience, capture a specific demographic, but also you can capture another demographic. That's also a plus.
A specific example of that, I owned an iPhone once, but I didn't touch any Apple stuff. We were a real non-Mac kind of shop, and I hate all the snooty people on TV mocking the Microsoft guy. And they all think they're better than me, and they probably are. But so I hate iPhones.
Okay.
But man, I love iPhone customers. We have 10 times as many Android users, and we have 10 times as many iPhone customers. They know how to pay for stuff. Steve Jobs trained them to buy. Google trained them to get everything for free.
Yep.
And boy, it's killing us. But so there's a platform I thought I didn't want to, I disrespected, but I love it on the other side.
All right, last question for anybody. Yes.
Do you have any sort of guidelines or tips on pricing a product you just released? Sale by, price range you shoot for exposure versus making money?
All right, so guidelines for pricing, should we go at $39.95 or $29.95? Kevin, any guidelines on pricing? You brought it up earlier. You thought maybe you priced too high.
Yeah, we put it at 5. People seem to think it should be 4. And this is the one thing we haven't fixed because I don't know. It felt like we couldn't launch at 5 and then drop it permanently. So we've just been doing every sale we can, basically.
Why the dollar? What does 20% mean at that?
Okay,
level?
so I've heard this guideline. I don't know if this is crap or not, but people have said an hour of gameplay equals $1 with indie games. I don't know if this makes any sense once you get past 5 or so, but. Our game was a little short when we launched it. We've improved the length since with more content to try and address this issue. But that's something I'm aware of. I mean, indie games are just, I don't know. But most people doing indie don't make any money. Because, they're just, people expect indie games to be really low priced. I don't know. It's a very bad thing that's happened. So, I don't know.
Yeah, but it's tough. So number one, just to clarify, I don't set my own price, so I only set it on my own site, and I sell it for $10, which is they can get it for $7 on all the other sites. I can't sell lower by contract, but I kept it at 10. I get to keep 9 on my own site. But the low price, lowballing yourself is evil and wrong in the long run. It's just the wrong decision. The people that I know that are successes on Steam are the ones that are actually charging more. People value. It's hard to explain, but the only people I know that are even close to making money on Steam are the people that are selling the $19 games.
Well, isn't there an impulse buy element too? If you see a game for $2, you're like, oh, I'll just get that because it's not cheap.
But not enough people are going to see it, and you're not going to get. There are not enough people there. The people on Steam are actually buying the bigger game. They may not be even playing them, which is there's that stupid stat that 80% of bought games on Steam never get played. It's just ridiculous. But don't undercut yourself. Don't you press. Everything is connected to your price. And
right, it's a messaging thing. Like
it is.
Put the value in the game so you feel good about putting a higher price on it.
That's the deal. If you underprice it, then it signals to everyone that it's not good. This is a deal with I forget what university did. There was a blind study on wine tasting. Is basically the deal where the only difference you could tell about whether or not they liked a wine better or not was whether or not the price was higher. And they knew the price was higher. They gave out 3 samples of wine, the exact same wine, put labels of how much it was. Everyone liked the one that was most expensive.
Were they paying for it?
No, they weren't.
So
there
that's
is
the
some.
other side of the question.
But it was great. It tasted wonderful.
But for instance, Robert with Sinker sold it for $1. I think there's using your $1 an hour, he should have sold it for at least $2. And here's the deal: if he loses 20% of sales, but he sold it for $2 instead of $1, he still made 60% more.
Here's how we did it. We are preparing a game, and I bought a bunch of Google AdWords and advertised this game at 4 different prices. And they clicked on it and they got a coming soon page. But the ad made it look like, the ad prominently exposed the price. And I found out that it was from $2.99, $4.99, $7.99, and $9.99. And there was definitely a middle. People paid more. People didn't see all the choices, and everybody saw one price.
Right.
But people like $4.99 and $7.99 better than $2.99. They didn't like $9.99 so much for this particular game and the way it was described.
Sure.
All right, we'll take one more question since you're ferociously waving the hand.
Oh, I didn't really want to propose a new question. I actually wanted to join in on the conversation.
All right, well, then you got to come up to the shotgun mic, and then you're going to have to write a piece of paper down for him so he's got your name. Come up here, tell us your name and the name of the game that you're promoting right now.
Oh, I didn't want to promote my game.
No, it doesn't matter. You got to do it now. Get up here.
Hey, guys. Hi, stream. I'm Vin. I run Studio 15. We're currently developing a 2D action game called Astoria Legends. And I really wanted to talk about the pricing because me and my team, we had a large conversation about that on what we want to price our games. And I think it comes down to what do you want to compete with? Because in the end, when you're making a game, when you're launching on Steam, it's all about, it's a competition. You are going against other games that in order to get a market share. And when you're pricing your game, you have to do your research in who do you want to compete with. If you're going to market your title as $19.99, you have to notice that you're going up against games like Cuphead, all of these like AAA high tier indie titles. And that's how you're going to see your game. If you're marketing your game, if you're pricing your game, you're going to have to tell yourself, this is what quality my game has to be in order to compete with everybody else in this price brackets. And I know there's different price brackets of like $4.99, $9.99, $14.99, $19.99. So it all comes down to a bit of research and knowing, or like putting a lot of beliefs in your title and knowing who do you want to like. Are you stopping me or?
No, I'm waiting for you to finish.
That's
so
his signal that he wants me first to jump on top of you and kick.
I'm gonna jump on what you said.
Okay.
That you want to decide what. it's quite possible if people did the research, they'll find that only 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 people at the $1 mark are making anything. Okay, but the 10% of the people at the $19.99, are making something on Steam, and that maybe your team should be shooting for a $19.99 game instead of the $1 game to throw it out. That you're already losing the battle just by picking the price market you went for.
Yeah.
I think part of the argument too, and
we have a whole panel on pricing.
It's very, very important.
Yeah, pricing is a huge conversation.
I think we just finished talking about Apple, right? I think I've had a little bit of, at least in my jobs throughout my life, I've had the pleasure of being a part of sales, right? What you quickly find is that people a lot of times have the money to buy certain things, right? And it's all about, like I said, it's about research, it's about economics, right? It's about where they're going to put that money to, right? And in our case, right, people who love playing video games buy a lot of video games. So in many respects, I don't even think it's about competition, whether you're going to spend $20 here or $20 there. I think people are more than willing to spend $40, right, to buy both. So I think it's really about valuing your game, where you put your game in tandem with where the market is, right? Who you're competing with. I think that should definitely dictate to where you want to market and price your game. But don't be afraid to put it at $20 if your game is a game being priced at $20, especially if you value it at that $20.
Absolutely agree, and I will take exception with something you said, that you're competing with these other games at $4.99 or $7.99. You're not. People are coming there. It's not that they only have $5 to spend and can only have one game. I mean, they've got $400 to spend, and will decide how they're going to divvy that money up. I learned this in 91. We launched a game at $20. How many of these are we going to sell? We sold a ton of them, and we sold them to people who were buying a whole lot of other games. And we were not competing with other games. We were competing with TV for a person's time more than their dollar. Yeah. So when you're looking at a sales price, look at the games you want to be bought alongside of, not the ones you think you're taking sales from or who take your sales. You're selling with them.
And I'm ambitious, and I'm going to close with this guy. I'm taking over the free-to-play market this year because I'm going to show people how to freaking do it ethically. Okay? And I'm going to share it with you guys right now, but this is the model I'm going out with. Okay? I create puzzles that are randomly generated that can play forever. Think pre-sell. And they each come with 5 variations. Okay? And they're sort of minimalist. They can sort of appeal to that group on Steam. But I'm going to give away my game. I'm going to give them 60 minimalist levels that all teach them how to play it. Then I'm going to give them 100 puzzles that they get to pick to choose how hard, how easy, which variation they like. And as soon as they get to 100, it's the Sudoku book model. Sudoku was given away in England for free just to sell the books in the newspapers. I don't know if you know that. Anyway, so that's the deal. After they play 100 and they're hooked, $1 for 100 more, or $5 and you own the game forever. And they'll already know it'll play these games forever. And that's the ethical way to do free-to-play, and I'm crossing my fingers.
All right, so the lesson for tonight: engage your influences early. Start fixing bugs and fix, and charge more.
And by the way, Ellen DeGeneres, since I want this on camera, Ellen DeGeneres, I am going to send her an iPad with Clutter 1000 on it, especially made for her, preloaded.
Excellent.
That's
and with that threat, we'll see you all later.
Can I say one thing while
one more thing.
While the camera's still on, I want to mention that, if I can put in plug, we're looking for a JavaScript intern. Should be smart, should know JavaScript, or one of those things.
Make up your mind, which do you want?
Either one. It's a paid position, gamesthatwork.com.
Ron's coming for it right now. Thank you all very much.